There's a thing about how psychology is taught at university here in Australia that might really surprise you. It surprised me. What is it? Well, I'll tell you in this video. The thing I'm talking about can be found in the Good Universities Guide. The guide aims to help prospective students decide what areas to study and what university to study at. And one of the key things it reports on are the results of the Student Experience Survey. The Student Experience Survey is a national annual survey of undergraduate and postgraduate students in higher education in Australia. And the survey is sent out to first year and final year students around August and September each year. And it's one of the key mechanisms used by the government and by higher education to reflect on the quality of teaching. The core part of the survey aims to measure students' experience of 6 things. They are skill development, quality of teaching, student support, learning resources, and learner engagement, and an overall thing called quality of entire educational experience. Here's an example of what the survey looks like. These are some of the survey questions under learner engagement. So, thinking about your insert name of course in insert survey year, how frequently have you participated in discussions online or face-to-face, worked with other students as part of your study, interacted with students outside of study requirements, interacted with students who are very different from you? And you have a choice of 4 responses for each of those. So 1 is never, 2 sometimes, 3 often, 4 very often. And that is scored with answer 1 getting a 0, 2 getting 33.33, answer 3 getting 66.66, and answer 4 getting 100. 100 signifies very positive, and 0 signifies not positive at all. Here's another question from that section on learner engagement. At your institution, whenever you're doing it, to what extent have you been given opportunities to interact with local students? So answer 1, not at all, 2, very little, 3, some, 4, quite a bit, 5, very much, 6, not applicable. And it's scored with 1 is 0, 2 is 25, 3 is 50, 4 is 75, 5 is 100, and 6 is not applicable, so it doesn't get a mark at all. So the results of the survey are reported as the percentage of students who rated those things positively. And the results are published in a report by the Student Experience Survey, but prospective students don't generally read that report. That's mostly read by university staff and government folk. Prospective students are more likely to read the Good Universities Guide, which they can find on the web, where the results are reported as a series of league tables, comparing all the universities with each other, and study areas are put into 20 groups. So let's have a look at the results. The latest survey results we've got are from 2021. That survey was completed by 265,000 students across the sector, which is a 41.1% response rate for those of you who love numbers. Now, I've put the 20 areas of study groups on my own little table here, and I've listed them in alphabetical order. So don't panic. Psychology is sitting down there at number 15, and that's just where it is alphabetically. So it's not doing badly at this stage. Now, let's see how psychology fared on that quality of entire educational experience. So here we go. Okay, so we're not the top dog. That's agriculture and environmental studies. Then we've got rehabilitation, that's physiotherapy and occupational therapy. Then we've got tourism, hospitality, personal services, sport and recreation. They have come in at position 3. And here's psychology, position 4. That's great. It's above medicine, and we do tend to measure ourselves against medicine quite a lot. So psychology looks pretty good. It's sat there towards the top, and that means students rated psychology positively. Yay, psychology. Let's look at learner engagement. We should be pretty safe here because, people are at the center of what we do, and you'd expect our students to be people. They're interested in people. not interested in machines like engineers are. So I'm guessing our students are interacting with each other and with other students more than most are. So we should be doing fine on this measure. So, learner engagement. Okay, so we're not in the top 5. That's a bit disappointing, particularly with medicine and rehabilitation being up there. We kind of like to see ourselves as a mix of those two things. Then we've got vets. Why are they ahead of us? They talk to animals, not people. And then we've got dentists. Well, they're kind of like psychologists. They talk to people who are down in the mouth. I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry. Let's see if we're not in the top 5. Let's see if we're in the top 10. Okay, we're not there. Well, that's a bit surprising. Even the engineers have beaten us. So we're not there yet. Not yet. Oh, yikes. We're right at the bottom. Now, perhaps that was just a one-off. So let's look at the survey results from 2020. Where are we there? Well, oh no. Oh dear. We're right there at the bottom. Let's look at 2019. Oh, yeah. Oh no. We're right down at the bottom again. But hey, maybe there's not much of a difference between the top and the bottom. Do you notice when you don't get a good result in a survey, you start questioning the survey? So that's what we're going to do. Maybe there's not a big difference between the people at the top of the league table and the people at the bottom of the league table. So let's look at the actual percentages that these subject areas got. And oh dear, there's a big difference between the top and the bottom. Here we've got a 28-point gap in 2019, a 33-point gap in 2020, and a 29-point gap in 2021. Those are big gaps. So there's a big difference between those at the top and those at the bottom. And actually, can you see the COVID impact? That came in 2020. So all the scores were much lower than in previous years during that COVID period, because people weren't talking to each other. They weren't interacting with each other except for online. So the Student Experience Survey is reporting that psychology students have the lowest level of positive experience when it comes to learner engagement. Now, when we go to the Good Universities Guide, we see this data passed out according to the university and undergraduate and postgraduate. Here's what a student sees who's interested in studying psychology, and they're looking to choose their university. They're less likely to see the low rating psychology gets against the other subject areas, because that's not a comparison that you can easily do on the Good University Guide website. I couldn't figure out how to get that data from that website. So they're more likely to see this league table of universities pitted against universities rather than study areas pitted against study areas. Now, let's have a look at that data, those league tables there, because what it'll show us is if psychology's low score on learner engagement is a result of a few bad apples, a few bad universities. So here we go. Oh yeah, now we've got some universities that scored really highly on this measure of learner engagement. Well, one is doing really well, Bond University at 80.2%. And things start falling off the cliff shortly after that. University of Notre Dame at 65%. Then we're down to 50% for Victoria University. And then it gets worse and worse, right down at 10% for the University of New England. Postgraduate is better, probably giving us a boost to that overall rating for psychology, because in the Student Experience Survey, it's the undergraduate and postgraduate combined that's been reported. So here, for postgraduate, we've got more universities in the 80s, but then it drops, and it drops considerably for a lot of the other universities. Look, it's down to less than 12% for James Cook University. But is that bad? Well, if it assumes we know what these results mean. Do they tell us that psychology students don't often work with other students? Do they tell us how much they want or don't want to work with other students, or how many opportunities they get to work with other students, or whether psychology students are particularly antisocial and want to work alone, or that psychology lecturers prefer students to work alone. The truth of it is, it could be any of those things or none of them. We just don't know, and that's because we don't know how students are interpreting the questions on the survey. We know what their survey response is, but we don't know why they responded to the survey in that way. Let me explain. So for those questions on how frequently they had contact with other students, the choice of responses are never, sometimes, often, and very often. And those categories are very subjective. If those are the only responses you can choose from and you have to choose one, and the thing you're being asked about is something you enjoy doing or you feel is worth doing, you might think that you can never get enough of it. So it's never often enough. So you might answer sometimes, even though you do that thing all the time. If it's something you don't like doing or you don't feel is worth doing, then doing it just once is perhaps often enough. So you might answer very often, even though you hardly do it at all. It's because surveys like this are measuring concepts that are subjective, and you can't get an objective measure from it. Also, the learner engagement result is an aggregate of a number of sub-measures, and most of those sub-measures are about students working with other students, but there are also questions about students feeling prepared for their study, and ones about students having a sense of belonging to their institution. But they're all those different sub-measures are stuck together under the one measure. So I don't know how to interpret the results, but the key thing is, how are they likely to be interpreted by the people who are reading these things? Universities, they tend to interpret the results in terms of a measure of performance, with a low rating on a league table indicating underperformance. Except for the universities right down at the bottom of the rating, who'll tend to say there's a problem with the survey. Prospective students, they're more likely to interpret those results in that way too, as some universities underperforming. And with the learner engagement measure, I don't know, but that might be interpreted by students as psychology students being disengaged, or more likely, maybe they'll think that it's something about psychology being taught in a way that's not very engaging. But I don't know, that's just my guess at how people might be interpreting these results. What's not clear is how I, as a lecturer, should respond to the results, because it's not clear what the results actually mean. But what I can do is put those results, perhaps the only thing I can do is put those results in some sort of broader context. So that's what I'll do for you just now. So I'll put this in the context of what I know about psychology and the university sector, but also what I've learned from teaching psychology over 30 years. So what I know is that our accrediting body, the Australian Psychological, not that one, the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council, is putting more of a focus on students working with other students in group work. They don't think at the moment that our students work enough in groups. They think they spend too much time working on their own. Now, whether that's in a response to the results of the student experience survey or not, I just don't know. But I also know that some psychology students don't want to engage with their classmates in learning activities. They don't turn up for tutorials, and they complain when students talk in class. And what I mean here is students who ask questions or give their views in class when asked to do so by the lecturer. And we have students who say that they just want to be taught by their lecturer and don't want to hear what their classmates have to say. We see that in written feedback, anonymous feedback that we get from some students. Not all students, but some students. I also know that psychology, for many years, has adhered to a didactic teaching method, because the teaching of the discipline has been content-driven. Didactic teaching is where what is taught is instruction and facts, and the student receives the knowledge from the lecturer without being encouraged to question it. Things are now changing, largely as a result of the university accrediting body, the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency, moving disciplines, subject areas, away from that model, that didactic model, and towards a model of teaching that promotes the teaching of skills rather than content. One of those skills being critical thinking. Psychology was one of the disciplines that was slowest to move on that, and it's only now moving because psychology's accrediting body, AHPRA, is now starting to walk in step with TEXA. But I also know that universities have mostly operated under a model of the autonomous worker, students producing their work independently of others. And this has been a very difficult model to push back on. We award degrees to individuals, not to groups. It's embedded in the university structure. But why it seems to be harder to push back against that in psychology is an interesting question. Perhaps it's a sign of how we've been dominated by an individualistic approach for much of our history that means we're quite comfortable with students working autonomously rather than collaboratively with their classmates. So, the survey raises more questions than it answers. It doesn't tell us a lot of things, and it would need more research to actually figure out what the heck the results really mean. But that's not the issue. The issue is, what does it look like to people who read these reports? Because those results that sit psychology at the bottom of the table when it comes to learner engagement surely would raise a few eyebrows, in that for a discipline that is essentially all about people, our students appear to be saying that they don't spend much time talking with other students. And out of all of the subject areas, you would perhaps have expected psychology students to be rated as among the most engaged when it comes to talking with their classmates or with other students. So, what do you think? If you've got a thought or two, I'd love to hear them. So put a comment in the comments box on YouTube if you've got time. If you're a psychology student, maybe you don't like sharing your thoughts with other people. Maybe that's what the survey says. So, yeah, who knows? Anyway, that's all from me. This one's gone on a little long. There was a lot to get through. Hope that's been useful. Anyway, till next time. Ta-da.